The order came just before dawn, a voice so flat it almost blended with the crash of the waves. Remove your clothes. 300 Japanese women froze where they stood. Nurses, clerks, civilians, faces turned toward the dim gray horizon. The humid air of Manila's port clung to their skin like glue. Crates clattered, ropes groaned, and somewhere far off an engine backfired. No one breathed. Eiko, a young nurse, felt her heart pounding louder than the surf. They had marched for days. Their uniforms were torn, their feet raw. Now this? Was this the vengeance they'd heard about? The punishment for surrender? She glanced at the guard closest to her. His rifle didn't rise. He was waiting too. When the command repeated, it wasn't a shout. It was procedure, methodical, practiced. Chilling because of how calm it sounded. A second voice followed, British, young, controlled. You will be inspected for lice and infection. Medical procedure. No harm will come to you. The women blinked at one another. Inspection? Not execution? Eiko whispered, So, this is how we die? No answer came, only boots shifting on gravel, a seagull crying overhead, and the sting of salt and fear mixing in the air. Then one soldier stepped forward, unfolded a white towel and held it out. No laughter, no smirk, just a towel. Eiko's trembling hands reached for it, half expecting the trick to reveal itself. But the towel was real. The mercy was real. That moment, so small, so quiet, split the war in half for her. Inside the medical tent, the air smelled of iodine and canvas. Lanterns swung gently in the breeze, painting warm circles on khaki walls. Captain Wallace worked with a steadiness that felt rehearsed. Not mechanical, but deliberate, like a man afraid of doing the wrong thing too quickly. He never raised his voice. He never stared. When a towel slipped, he turned away until the woman fixed it. He said nothing except numbers, temperatures, pulse counts. Behind him, medics moved quietly, disinfecting instruments, laying out gauze. Eiko's throat tightened. She had expected disgust, maybe cruelty, but what she saw in their faces was something else: embarrassment. And that embarrassed kindness hit harder than hate. Each examination lasted seconds, but the silence between them lasted longer. Every gesture whispered a truth the war had tried to erase, that even enemies could still behave like humans. When Wallace finished, he nodded to the interpreter. Next group. His voice carried fatigue, not authority. Eiko wrapped the towel tighter around her shoulders, heart still hammering. She wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or terrified that mercy itself might be a trick. Morning broke over the camp like an afterthought. Sunlight too bright, too soft for prisoners. The guards called roll, counted heads, then opened the mess line. Metal bowls clanged against each other. Steam rose from barrels of broth. The smell, meat, onions, maybe barley, was almost unbearable after weeks of hunger. Eiko waited, bowl in hand, eyes darting toward the soldiers ladling the soup. No one shouted, no one struck anyone, just quiet efficiency. She sat with the others on the ground. The first sip burned her tongue and she nearly cried. It wasn't just warmth, it was disbelief made liquid. One nurse beside her, "They feed us better than our officers." Eiko wanted to laugh but couldn't. She looked at the soldier across the fence, a young man, awkward, smiling because he didn't know what else to do. In that moment, the war shrank. It became only two people, one giving food, one receiving it. Neither sure why it felt so heavy. That night, the women slept for the first time in months without dreaming of bullets. Mercy had arrived, not grand, not heroic, just soup in a bowl and silence around it. Nights grew longer again, but calmer. Rain pattered on the canvas roofs, and the smell of wet rope filled the barracks. Someone found scraps of paper in a supply crate, and soon the women began to write. They wrote to no one, just to remember they were still capable of forming sentences that weren't orders or pleas. Eiko wrote, thoughtful, "The enemy I feared most was my own heart." She folded the note and hid it beneath her blanket. but the next morning Wallace found it during inspection. He should have confiscated and burned it. Instead, he read it twice, then slipped it into his pocket. Rumors spread faster than fire. The Brit's gone soft. He talks to them. He keeps their letters. No one knew what was true, and in war truth mattered less than whispers. Wallace tried to ignore the stares of his men. At night he sat under the same lantern that had lit the inspections, reading the letter again, wondering when compassion had become contraband. Aiko didn't know if he still had it, or if it was ash by now, but she felt its weight in the air whenever he passed, an invisible thread connecting two enemies who could never speak but somehow understood the same ache. The camp slept under drizzle that night, British guards, Japanese prisoners, all breathing the same damp air, none of them sure anymore who was supposed to hate whom. Dawn came wrapped in mist. Engines coughed alive, their sound echoing between tin roofs and barbed wire. Guards moved briskly, checking clipboards, counting heads. The smell of diesel mixed with morning dew. Aiko clutched her blanket, eyes fixed on the trucks idling near the gate. Each vehicle already half filled with women, faces expressionless, waiting to vanish. Her name was on the list. She knew it before anyone called it. She stepped forward when summoned. Her legs trembled from fatigue, not fear, at least that's what she told herself. Wallace stood near the trucks, helmet tucked under his arm. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat, but in that heartbeat, words passed that neither language could carry. She climbed onto the truck, wood creaking under her bare feet. Just before it moved, she turned. And then, slowly, deliberately, she saluted. Not mockery, not surrender, respect. Wallace hesitated, then returned it, barely perceptible. Engines roared, drowning everything else. Dust rose, sunlight cutting through it like glass shards. Aiko watched the camp disappear behind the haze, and for the first time she realized how silence could weigh more than chains. The new camp felt different the moment the truck stopped. No shouting, no confusion, just structure. Whitewashed barracks in perfect rows, gravel raked into straight lines. Everything smelled of bleach and new paint, a cleanliness that didn't comfort but warned. American guards stood in pressed uniforms, clipboards in hand. They spoke quickly, precisely. Each woman became a number, her name translated into an entry on paper. Aiko tried to follow the new rhythm. Roll call, rations, rest, hygiene. It was efficient, even fair. But fairness without warmth felt colder than cruelty. In the British camp, mercy had been human, messy, awkward. Here it was procedural, clinical. Compassion had become a checkbox. At night, the barracks were silent except for the rhythmic, softly tap of rain on tin. Aiko lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking how strange it was to feel both safe and invisible at once. Outside, a generator hummed, a lullaby made of machinery. The letters looked harmless, but every woman froze reading them. Memories of Manila's first command, "Remove your clothes," flooded back like ghosts. Inside the concrete building, the air was wet and sharp with disinfectant. Pipes hissed overhead. Metal valves gleamed under electric bulbs. American medics moved in pairs, rubber gloves snapping into place. Their voices were flat, emotionless, professional. "Step forward. Keep eyes closed." Sprays of cold mist erupted, catching light like rain. The women flinched, instinctively shielding their faces. But this was no punishment, no humiliation, just sterilization. Aiko felt the sting of chemical soap on her skin, smelled the sharpness of medicine. And in that moment she understood. These men weren't cleansing them as enemies. They were cleansing them as organisms, as lives that still mattered to statistics. 2 minutes later, silence, dripping water, steam curling toward vents. A medic handed her a clean towel without a word. The gesture was neither kind nor cruel, it was simply duty. Yet, somehow, duty had kept them alive. After the shower, Aiko stood before a fogged metal mirror. The glass was dull, warped, refusing to give her a whole reflection. She wiped it with the edge of her towel. A face appeared, thinner, older, but hers. For months, she had imagined herself a ghost, erased by surrender. Now, in this dim reflection, she saw movement, breath, light. Not pride, not even relief, just life. A scar ran across her collarbone, pale against damp skin. She traced it slowly, remembering her commander's words from long ago. Pain proves loyalty. But here, pain had no audience, no purpose. Behind her, other women moved quietly, drying their hair, folding towels. No one spoke. The silence wasn't fear anymore. It was exhaustion mixed with awe. Echo whispered to her reflection, "They clean our bodies and our hatred too." For the first time, she felt something close to peace, not safety, not joy, but the fragile awareness that she might live beyond the war. The afternoon burned white. Dust hung motionless above the yard. Then a crackle of static sliced the stillness. A jeep idled near the gate, its radio coughing through the noise. Japan has accepted the terms of unconditional surrender. No one moved. For a full minute, even the insects stopped. A guard slowly removed his helmet. Another crossed himself. The women stood as if carved from salt. Echo stared at the ground, the words sinking slowly into the heat. The war is over. She had imagined this moment would come with thunder, cheers, fireworks, retribution. Instead, it arrived as a whisper carried by static and wind. One woman beside her began to sob. Another laughed softly, a laugh that broke halfway into a cry. But Echo felt nothing. No victory, no defeat. Only the hollow ache of surviving when others hadn't. The guards didn't celebrate either. They just stood there, motionless under the same sun, as if everyone suddenly realized that when a war ends, nobody wins. Weeks later, dawn spread over Manila Bay like spilled ash. Ships waited offshore, rusted, patient, tired. The prisoners filed up the gangway one by one, their shadows stretching long across the deck. Echo clutched a small canvas bag, a spare uniform, a toothbrush, and one folded letter. She leaned against the railing as the engines rumbled to life. Behind her, the city shrank, harbor cranes, tents, the faint echo of orders fading into distance. The sea was calm, almost too calm, as if exhausted by years of witnessing cruelty. During the voyage, silence became their language. Women stared at the horizon for hours, some whispering names, others mouthing prayers that had no gods left to hear them. On the third day, the ship docked at a ruined port. Tokyo lay in gray ruins. Smoke curled from hollow buildings, the smell of salt now mixed with the bitter tang of burnt paper. As Echo stepped down the ramp, a child behind a fence held out a rice ball, half cracked, still warm. She took it with both hands, bowed low, tears burning behind her eyes. Kindness again. Unexpected, uninvited, undeniable. That night in a crowded dormitory, Echo unfolded the old paper she had carried across oceans. It was her unfinished letter, the one Wallace had once kept. By candlelight, she wrote the final line. "You taught me there is honor in letting others live." Decades passed. Empires changed flags, cities rebuilt, and the memory of that island of mercy faded into footnotes. Then, one afternoon, 70 years later, a curator in Canberra opened a parcel donated by a soldier's family. Inside, an old khaki coat, and in its lining, a folded letter. The paper was brittle, the ink almost gone, but the handwriting was steady, graceful. It began, "To the man who showed me mercy when war forgot how." Across the ocean, another archive logged a similar find, a British medic's journal, with a small translation written in pencil on its back. The same words. Two letters, two sides of the same act. They were placed together under glass, side by side, their edges touching like two hands finally meeting after a lifetime. Visitors paused before the display. No uniforms, no medals, just handwriting and silence. Outside, rain tapped gently on the museum windows. Each drop sounded like a heartbeat from the past. Echo's granddaughter stood there on opening day, reading her grandmother's words under the soft light. She whispered, "You came home after all." The rain kept falling, washing the glass until the reflection of the letter blurred into hers. And there, beneath the title, "Mercy Outlasts Victory," one sentence gleamed in the dim light. The enemy I feared most was my own heart. Because sometimes, sir, it isn't victory that survives a war, it's decency.